Hi class and welcome to week 9. I can hardly believe that it is already October 21st and we are on the downhill side of our semester together. So thank you for all of your hard work up to this point, and I look forward to the next, how many weeks do we have left? 7 weeks including this week. So we have a lot to do, but I'm here every step of the way with you, so please don't be stressed or worried about anything, okay? Um, we have a draft of your lesson plan due on October 31st, so you have 11 days to work on it, and remember, it is only a draft because I'm going to give you feedback, and I do realize that this is the first time, probably that most, if not all of you, have actually done a formal lesson plan. So this is a very abbreviated, short version of a lesson plan, but it's got all of the important components that you will see over and over again, and no matter what template you come across in your future classes. So I wanted to take the opportunity to go through it with you and also to look at the resources that I have left as links in the document itself. So first, you are going to just select a grade that you would like to write your lesson plan for. It can be the same grade as where you're observing. It can be a different grade. It's completely and totally up to you, okay? So you'll input your grade in this spot here on your lesson plan, and then you're going to choose the subject. So it'll either be ELA, math, social studies, science. If there are subjects that I am not including in that list, then of course you are welcome to use those as well, like art or PE. I don't think we have anybody who's interested in teaching those subjects particularly, but if I've missed something in that list, please go ahead and use whichever subject it is that you would like, okay? And then you're going to title your lesson, and this can be something just very brief and descriptive, okay? In stage 1, as you read in the article last week, that is the desired results, and that just means that that's where you set the stage for what it is that you want your students to learn. So you're going to select standards, and again, I realize this is the first time that you've interacted with these documents, and so this is just an introduction to all of these so that you're familiar with them, you know where to find them, and know a little bit more about them. So you don't need to stress out about that component at all. But you find the standards at corestandards.org or at the PED website. So I will work through a example with you. Let's say that we are doing 3rd grade and ELA is my thing, so I will select that, and why don't we say ELA here. The lesson title will be character traits, okay? So ELA standards are Common Core standards, and I'm going to click on that site. And here's what that looks like. So I'm going to go to English Language Arts Standards for reading literature, 3rd grade. And I'm going to find a standard that includes character traits, or that would fit with character traits. So this standard here describe characters in a story. For example, their traits, motivations, or feelings, and explain how their actions contribute to the sequence of events. So I'm just going to copy that text, go back to my standards, and copy that in right there. And then I'm going to move on to my lesson objectives because I don't need more than one standard. If you feel like there are others that you want to include, that's fine. But definitely don't include more than 3 as a rule of thumb, and one standard itself is absolutely okay. especially as you're just getting familiar with them. So lesson objective needs to include a noun and a verb that describe what it is you want your students to learn. So I have provided this resource here that gives you kind of an overview of how to write good lesson objectives, and then they give you good verbs. And what I want you to pay particular attention to are these verbs to avoid. So we don't use words like appreciate, believe, enjoy, know, or understand is another one. I see a lot of students will understand the character traits in a story, but we can't measure understanding. And so you need to think about how you will actually see your students demonstrate what they have learned to you. And so here I'll write a lesson objective that says students will identify the traits of one character in a story of their choice. Okay. And I can even be more specific and say 3 traits of one character in a story of their choice. So now that we have a lesson objective identified, we are going to think about a transfer statement. And a transfer statement is just about helping the teacher to understand how the lesson connects to things in the real world so that we're setting a larger purpose for what it is that we're teaching our students to do. So you can see the guiding question here is, how can you connect what you want students to learn to the outside world? In other words, why is it important for them to learn this beyond just saying that it's in the standard? Because kids don't care if it's in the standard or not. You want to make sure that you are thinking about real world connections that make this relevant for them. So there's a resource here that I've linked in your document that goes to an article written by the same person that you read the backward design article from last week. And so you can look through there for ideas if you're having a hard time coming up with a transfer statement. And they have some good examples of long-term transfer goals is what they talk about there, but they certainly do not need to be that formal. They should just be a brief statement like what I have here that shows how, for example, character traits help students to understand other people's perspectives and to be able to describe what people are like in the outside world. So here is my example of a transfer statement for this particular lesson. Okay. As we get into stage 2, that is acceptable evidence. And what that is really the evidence that you have that students have achieved the learning objective that you have written up here above. Okay. It is not what we typically think about when we hear the word assessment, which are things like tests and quizzes. Those are more formal, summative kinds of assessments. I'm talking about the formative assessments that give you continuous evidence that your students are learning. So my example is that students in this lesson will complete a graphic organizer that includes 3 character traits for the character that they chose from the story that they are reading. If you would like to see additional examples of acceptable evidence or those formative assessments, you can click on this link here and it takes you to a Google slideshow with 56 different examples of formative assessments, and they include things like exit tickets and specific graphic organizers that you might consider using in your particular lesson. And we think about this here because we are backward planning, and instead of fitting an activity to what we want our students to learn, we are instead ensuring that the activity follows what we are setting out as our goals for student learning. So it is important to think things through in this order. After you've done that, then you're going to move on to learning experiences. And In the learning experiences, you'll see the components that are like traditional lesson plans, and it includes an introduction first. You will also hear this referred to as an anticipatory set or a hook. And basically, it just answers the question, how will you introduce the lesson and grab students' attention? So for this lesson on character traits, I might actually say to my students, what kinds of words would you use to describe Elsa in Frozen? And then you'll take responses from students, and they'll probably say things like brave, independent, those kinds of words. And then you can move directly into communicating the learning objectives, because you will have grabbed their attention with something that is engaging for them or relevant in their world, something that they can relate to, and kind of activate the prior knowledge that they already have related to the way that we describe characters or people. The learning objectives component is just how you're going to communicate the learning objectives that you've written above to your students so that they know what the goals are for the lesson. And it seems like a little thing or a little repetitive, but it actually makes a huge difference in student engagement. And so it's really important that we put how we're going to communicate that in our lesson plans. So for this lesson, I would say today we're going to be learning about character traits, words that help us to describe the characters in a story. By the end of the lesson, you should be able to identify at least 3 traits of a character in a book that you are reading. And it's just as simple as that, okay? The instruction piece is a numbered list of the steps that you're going to take to teach the lesson, and it includes what both the teacher will do and what the students will do. And when you are writing this piece, I want you to think about I do, we do, and you do. I do is what the teacher does in order to give the students the information they need to reach the learning objectives. It's that more traditional kind of instructional content piece. We do includes guided practice with the teacher so that the students have an opportunity to practice what they're learning, but with more specific guidance from you as they do it. The you do piece is what you're actually having your students do as independent practice. And it doesn't have to be independent of each other, it just needs to be more independent of the teacher so they have an opportunity to take on more responsibility in applying their learning. Okay, so I've actually color-coded in my list. The blue represents what I do as the teacher, the green represents what we do together, and the red represents what you do or what the students will do independently. Okay, so I would have my students talk about character traits and tell them that character traits are describing words or adjectives that we use to describe a character. Before we talk about characters, let's think of some words that you might use to describe yourself. I would give examples as the teacher of my own character traits, for example, kind, caring, and hardworking, to get them thinking about words that we use to describe people. And then I would give them 5 minutes to write down at least 3 words that describe themselves. And after that, I would ask the students to share their words as a class, and then I would write them on the board as a list that they can use to help generate ideas for the assignment that they're going to complete on their own. Okay. Next, I would pass out a copy of the Character Traits Graphic Organizer. I would tell students that we're going to read a picture book together, Jumanji by Chris Van Allsburg, and ask them to pay attention to Peter, a young boy in the story, as we read the story out loud together. As I read that story aloud, I would stop to talk about Peter and think about words that describe his character and why the students think that the words fit Peter's character. And then we would fill in the graphic organizer together while we're reading that story aloud. And so that is the we do piece of things, because as the teacher, I would be guiding the students, they would be generating ideas, and so we would complete that together as we're reading a story aloud. Okay. Once the read aloud is over, I would give students instructions to choose a character in a book that they are reading on their own, and then they would fill out a new graphic organizer for their character. And that is the independent practice that you do piece, but it also serves as my assessment of whether or not they understand how to identify character traits of a character in a story. Okay. The wrap up is just how you're going to bring the lesson to a close. And so I would say today we learned about character traits. You all did a great job describing Peter and Jumanji, and you were excellent thinkers as you described the characters in the books you're reading. Tomorrow we're going to think about how the story might be different if our characters had different traits. Characters are really important in the stories we read and can help us to understand the storyline on a deeper level. Okay, so you can see that I just included text that kind of reviews what we did in this lesson and gives them a little bit of a preview as to how this connects to what we're going to be doing later on. So this is a very abbreviated version of a lesson plan, but again gives you an idea of the important components that you include when you're doing that. Because this isn't a lesson that you're actually going to be teaching, I don't have additional information included in this plan like materials and accommodations or things like that, okay? I just want you to basically think through a good lesson that has a learning objective, an assessment component, and then these basic components of learning experiences with that I do, we do, and you do component to it, okay? So this example is posted in your module for you to take a look back at, and you have the embedded resources here within the template itself so that you have an opportunity to explore the standards, other resources about objectives, transfer statements, etc. So you should have what you need to brainstorm a draft lesson plan for any topic that you choose, for any grade that you choose, and that will be your assignment for this week. Remember that it is a draft, so please don't be stressed about it. It is something that I will work through with you and I will give you feedback on before you turn in a final assignment that reflects any of those changes that I ask you to make when you turn it in the first time, okay? Please email me if you have any questions at all. You know that's what I'm here for, and I hope everyone has a good week. Thank you.